Welcome aboard TED Talks Cruises, the podcast where wanderlust meets wisdom. Join our two hosts on a cruising adventure full of laughter, learning, and luxury. Ken Conan is a cruise rookie. He's wide-eyed, full of questions, and maybe still figuring out which end is aft. Ted Blank is a seasoned cruise expert who's been there, done that, and he even has a preferred deck chair. Each week, Ted and Ken dive into the world of cruising, from picking the right itinerary to insider tips, their personal insights, and behind-the-scenes secrets. Whether you're planning your first cruise or you're a platinum tier cruiser looking for fresh perspectives, TED Talks Cruises brings relatable stories, helpful advice, and plenty of good vibes. So get ready to laugh, learn, and set sail. No passport required.
Hey, it's Ken Conan with TED Talks Cruises. Welcome to the show today. I am the travel rookie, and we have with us, as always, our favorite expert, Mr. Ted Blank. How are you, sir?
Hey, Ken. Good to be here. And my name is Ted Blank. I am the cruise expert on our show, and excited to take us to a new destination today.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun one today.
Yeah, I heard a rumor that this is a place that you haven't been, but is on your bucket list.
Yeah, that is correct. My wife has been to this place back, I think, when she was backpacking.
You have technically been there.
Well, you know what? I have. Yep. That's right. Yep. That's right. So how don't we give away? Where's our spot today?
So today we're going to go to France.
I love it.
In particular, we're going to talk about river cruising in France.
There you go. Perfect. Yep.
Better?
Yeah, it's better. Yep.
So today we're going to go to France, and today we are going to talk about river cruising in France.
Love that.
The top two river cruise destinations in Europe are the Rhine and the Danube.
Yes.
And then after people have done that, this may come as a great surprise. People love river cruising.
Yeah.
And so they'll come back and they'll say, where should we go next?
Yep.
And France is a great choice. If you love France, great place to go for your first river cruise.
Yeah.
But if you've been on a couple of river cruises, or maybe you've taken an ocean cruise in the area, France is a great country to spend some time on the rivers of. And even the canals. We'll take a deeper dive and go off the beaten path a little bit for folks.
Yeah, you mentioned that pregame, that canal piece. I can't wait to hear about that. That sounds really interesting.
We'll save that for the end. We'll make the folks wait.
Little teaser on that one. I like that. All right, so where do we fly in for our pre-trip adventure?
Yeah, so river cruising in France, there are really three options. And the first option is the Seine River, which starts in Paris. Most of the cruises actually start and end in Paris. Huh. And you go up to the ocean. In a city called Le Havre, which is near the beaches of Normandy, where the D-Day landings took place 81 years ago. Wow. Actually, it was just Victory in Europe Day, 80 years, so 81 years ago was the D-Day landings. Second option is to take a cruise on the Rhône and the Saône rivers. Okay. Those are going to be in the south of France, in the area of Provence and Burgundy.
All right.
Now, when I say Burgundy, Ken, something probably pops into your mind.
Yeah.
Would it be wine?
Yeah.
Maybe food?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Burgundy, beautiful culinary destination in France. And then the third one is from the city of Bordeaux, through that wine region as well.
Wine.
On a river called the Gironde River. So that's kind of a little more of a niche river cruise. Okay. The Seine River and the Rhône and the Saône rivers are the two most popular river cruises in France. And you'll actually touch France on the Rhine River. And so you were in Strasbourg, which is in France as well. So I guess technically you've done France.
That's right. Yeah, we had the river levels for us at the time were a little bit low, if I remember right. And so it was interesting, we spent the night as we were kind of navigating that in a nice hotel, and it was all French.
Yes, it was.
Everything was French. Right. And so I was like, I'm in France, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I should say that I took my first trip to France. It was actually probably my first overseas trip, really, besides Canada. Okay. In second grade. And
oh my gosh.
Yeah, my dad happens to speak French fluently. Wow. And he spent some time in college in France, and he actually still has some friends who are French who live in France, in Paris and Bordeaux and some other places. And then I went back in high school for the official high school trip to France, which was a fun experience.
I bet.
And then have been back several times since then, and I speak French quite well.
Do you?
Not fluently by any means. My accent is horrible, but it does add to my enjoyment a little bit, and I love France. It's got everything we talk about. It's got amazing, interesting history, the food off the charts,
phenomenal,
and it's a beautiful country as well. So it checks every box in terms of European destinations.
That is awesome. I cannot wait to get into this trip. It sounds like all the boxes that I look for are check, check, check.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to hear more about where we start.
Yeah, so the first option, which is in kind of the northern part of France, are the river cruises that operate on the Seine River. And so they will start in Paris in most cases, and you'll spend your pre-cruise program in Paris.
Wow.
Now, this is a place where it's important to kind of think a little bit about Paris. Paris is huge.
Okay.
There is a lot to see there. And even for the first-time visitor to Paris, it's kind of tough to get everything into a couple days.
Really?
So most of the cruise lines offer relatively short packages in Paris, typically 2 nights.
Okay.
And then in many cases, the ship will spend a night in Paris before it departs on its cruise. So you can end up with 3 nights there. And the cruise lines have some nice packages in France that are, kind of easy to work within. Yeah. But it's a place where I definitely recommend folks think about working with us and customizing their sightseeing in Paris. Yeah, because you might really be interested in seeing, for example, the Louvre Art Museum,
right,
or the Musée d'Orsay, the other major art museum in Paris. And if that's your interest and you want to do that and spend some time there, the Louvre is huge.
Yeah.
It's the size of a small airport. I mean, it's gigantic.
Really?
And, having a guide, having a plan about what you want to see is really, really important.
Mm-hmm.
You could spend 3 weeks and not see everything in the Louvre. I think if you literally tried to walk from room 1 to room X, at the end, it would take you days to do it. It's just gigantic.
Wow. I had no idea.
And every room is packed with art. Huh. And some folks go there, they want to see the couple major attractions. They want to see the Mona Lisa, the Winged Victory, and the Venus de Milo, the 2 statues. And you can do that pretty efficiently. But if you really want to see the Louvre and really delve into the art there, spend some time there. Across the river is the Musée d'Orsay, which is where the Impressionist art is, and a lot of other things as well. And so a lot of cruise lines aren't going to include those in their pre-cruise packages, primarily because just the time involved. Other things, the Eiffel Tower and Notre Dame, and a little short river cruise on the Seine River through Paris, where the river cruise ships can't fit, is part of it. But seeing the Arc de Triomphe, Montmartre, I mean, there's just so much in Paris. So it's a place I really encourage folks to think about doing a customized pre-cruise tour.
For sure.
And the highlight, when you get on the ship, the first highlight is if the ship is spending the night in Paris, you'll actually sail up to the bridge right by the Eiffel Tower.
Come on.
And you watch the Eiffel Tower light up at 10 o'clock at night.
Oh, my gosh.
And they come by and they pass out a drink. Now, you're thinking, oh, my gosh, what drink could this be?
Right. A little champagne, maybe?
Not
I
champagne.
don't know.
No, it's Calvados. Calvados is apple brandy, and it's made in Normandy.
Okay.
And so this cruise is going to take you to Calvados brandy country, and so you start off with a little glass of Calvados.
That's fun.
You can also have some champagne if you'd like to.
That's really fun.
Yeah.
I can't imagine heading out of a city like that, and you're on it's kind of like coming into Budapest when we did that.
Very
it was just
similar.
I picture it as just like like a jaw-dropping moment where what
there is the Eiffel
happening?
Tower.
Right,
it's right there. And you can see it from a little ways away. And as you head out, you head through Paris, and Paris is big. So you make your way through Paris, and you go through some kind of residential parts and industrial parts. And then all of a sudden, you're actually out in the countryside. And that's where France gets to be really beautiful.
Interesting.
And, I think a lot of people think of France in terms of the cities.
Yeah.
But I think the French countryside is actually one of the most beautiful, charming areas to visit. And you're going to spend about 5 days kind of putzing your way through the French countryside. The cruise doesn't go very far.
Interesting.
If you drove from one end to the other in a car, it would take you about 2 hours.
No way.
So you're going at a very, very slow pace. Yeah, you're not going very far. And along the way, you'll visit Monet's gardens in Giverny, which are just incredible.
Wow.
They are one of those places that look like the tourist brochure.
Really?
And so you start to think about this. So you got to see some Monet paintings at the Musée d'Orsay. Now you're seeing Monet's gardens. You've got this artistic tie-in to things. But then you also have the D-Day beaches in Normandy coming up. So it's a really neat trip. And then along the way, you'll stop in some other small towns. We had a chance to visit a cheese dairy where they make camembert cheese.
Now, what is that?
So it's very much like brie cheese. It's a soft, soft rinded cheese that's made in Normandy. They would probably kill me if I said it was like brie, but most of us would think of it as like brie. They make excellent butter in Normandy, by the way. It's a very dairy-focused area. And then they grow apples there, where they make apple cider and apple brandy, which is called Calvados.
Got it.
Now, apple cider, just to warn people, is not what we drink in the United States. It's a hard fermented beverage.
Oh,
so it has alcohol in it.
It'll get you
So
going.
they actually have apple juice, which is just plain old apple juice. But apple cider is an alcoholic beverage in France. You know, it's France. I mean, you got to enjoy. So
what do you expect?
You get to see that. You get to go to some castles, and then you have a day to explore those D-Day landing beaches.
Wow.
Which just really, I think, something every American should experience.
Agree.
That. And to hear the story in depth of how it came to be and how the day unfolded, and then to actually see it as you go and start to understand things, I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
It's very powerful to go to the American Cemetery, to see a lot of the monuments there. So it's a very diverse cruise. And if you were to kind of make a list of all the things in Europe, you know, interesting history, but not just ancient history, kind of contemporary history, great food and beverages, and interesting history, or interesting beauty, kind of scenic beauty, whether natural or gardens. It's got everything. And then some of the cruises will actually have an extension that keeps going down the coast of France to Brittany.
Okay.
And usually you stay in a city called Saint-Malo, which is a really charming walled city along the Atlantic Ocean.
Okay.
It happens to be where Jacques Cartier set off to discover the New World.
No way.
And it's very near an attraction called Mont Saint-Michel.
Okay.
And Mont Saint-Michel, you've seen it. You may not realize it.
Yeah.
It's that little abbey church that's on a tiny island off the coast.
Unbelievable.
You walk up to the top, and there's the abbey church.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely unbelievable place. Now, I have to say that our tour guide told us it was 500 steps to get to the top.
Yeah.
I think she lied.
It was
I think it's more like 900.
You're like
from bottom to top.
627.
I've gotten way past 500, but it is absolutely well worth doing.
Wow.
If you're physically able to do it. And even if you're not, you can stay kind of in the lower portions of the town that the abbey is built upon and explore a little bit as well. So it's a really just amazing site.
I got a question for you, and this is probably way out to lunch as usual with my rookie questions. But does it depend on like the tide if you can get out there or not?
It does.
Is that?
It does.
No.
They have a bridge.
Okay.
So now they have a bridge that gets out there. But up until probably about 25 years ago, you could only go at low tide.
Oh my gosh.
And if you're really adventurous and you want to spend some time there, they have tours that walk out into the tidal flats, and you look for little, clams and oysters and things like that. Nice. And you can actually explore it. So you'll see people, with their pants rolled up to their knees, and they're out there walking through kind of the mucky swamp. And then you see the water start to come in, and you're like, hurry, hurry, hurry. And people are watching, and of course, they all make it back. But the other thing, speaking of food, there's so much incredible food along the way there. But one of the best things that I had in Saint-Malo is called salt marsh lamb. So there are lambs that graze in kind of the river delta just right around Saint-Malo.
Yeah.
And instead of eating regular grass like they eat the salt-infused grass that grows in this salty river delta. And it gives the lamb a very, very different taste. It's a very, very regional delicacy. And it's so good.
Really?
It's really good. So, for breakfast, you have your croissant, your coffee. For dinner, you have your lamb, salt marsh lamb.
Goodness.
They also make something that I think you would appreciate, and it's called a galette.
Galette, okay.
Gallette. And it's like a crepe, but it's made out of buckwheat instead of regular crepe flour.
Yeah.
And so they make sweet ones, but most of them are savory. Huh. So you might have like eggs and ham or vegetables, like asparagus and ham, and it's meant to be a meal. So you have these galettes, and one of the places we stopped when we were touring down there when I was there the last time was just this little tiny town, and it had about 3 restaurants. One of them was a galette restaurant.
This is awesome.
Best galette ever. So good. They're just so good.
That's awesome.
And you can choose your fillings, and so if you don't want to have eggs or cheese, you can kind of have whatever you want to, but just a delightful meal.
How fun.
And then it turned out that this little galette restaurant was connected with a soda manufacturer.
Come on.
And so they use local fruit to make a local soda.
Gosh, this is great.
In the region there.
This is great.
Just those experiences, those kind of neat little culinary experiences you have. So next time I get there, I'm going to have to find my way back to this little town to have another galette and a soda.
Well, and it makes me think the next time when I go there finally, I'm going to be like, Ted, what was that place again? Tell me more about that.
I'm sure I took a picture. I mean, I'm getting better at that, taking pictures of like restaurant signs.
Right.
So I remember where they are.
I love that.
And you know, the nice thing about doing this as a river cruise, you know, it's something people can do independently. They can do it as a self-drive. There are guided tours there as well. But the river cruise, you know, your ship is your hotel for most of it, so you have kind of that nice floating hotel. And the most beautiful route from Paris to the sea is along the river.
Yeah, I bet.
And so it just is really beautiful. And you get back after having gone to Monet's gardens, you know, you had a really neat experience, and you might spend the afternoon just kind of scenic cruising up the Seine River.
Oh, how
so
beautiful.
it's nice. The pace is nice. There's free time. There's guided activities included.
Yeah.
It is a great river cruise. I think for folks who've never been to Europe, definitely put it on the list. And if you have done a river cruise, this is one I think you definitely want to think about.
I like that a lot. And if I remember, we did another cruise show, and hopefully I'm not going too far off the rails here, but we did another cruise show that was kind of dedicated to like the Normandy experience too, right? They have those as well?
Yeah, so exploring the D-Day landing beaches is really definitely part of it.
Okay.
Most of the cruise lines will have a full day excursion out there. Just depends kind of on the order they do things. And you will go from one end of the beaches to the other.
Really?
Which is really incredible. And the guides, you know, as always, they will have local guides.
Oh, good.
Will take you.
I was going to ask that, yeah.
Yeah, and so the last time we were there, the guide, her grandmother had been in the French Resistance.
Come on.
It was really interesting.
Oh, that's just
awesome. Kind of personal stories.
Yeah.
And I think these days, you know, you're not going to see World War II vets traveling there. The first time I was there, there were some. We went with my uncle, who was actually a World War II vet, and so very interesting to hear those stories. But the museums and the monuments are very well preserved, very interesting, and you'll learn a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I'd recommend reading that book, The Longest Day, before you get there.
Yeah.
But even if you don't, you'll learn the story as you go.
Wow. Yeah, my grandfather was a pilot in World War II, and definitely some of his stories, and I don't know, there's just something about when you have somebody that has been in the mix, so to speak, you know, and I don't know, that Private Ryan movie like shook me.
Yeah, Saving Private Ryan.
Just
the
crazy.
Longest Day is
Longest
actually
Day.
The movie is much more historically
Is that the
accurate. Same story of
Oh, it
D-Day.
is. I didn't know that, Ted.
Yeah,
Okay.
That was like back in the day of John Wayne and those folks.
Yeah.
And so I think Tom Hanks was in Saving Private
Okay,
Ryan.
I didn't know that.
But it's pretty historical.
Okay.
And so if you watch it, you get a really, really good, from the beginning to the end in a pretty historical way, view of Normandy. So you can read the book or you can watch the movie.
Awesome. Well, that is the Seine River, and I think are you ready to shift gears just a little bit?
So back to Paris, and then home from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on that one, it is kind of a out and back. Is that how that goes?
Most of them are out and back. There are a few that only go one way.
I didn't know that. Okay.
And then the ones that go one way, you can actually continue down into Normandy and Brittany and see Mont Saint-Michel and Saint-Malo and some of those other places.
All right. So I've got a rookie question for you. So if we're going out and back, is it we go out kind of at a leisurely pace, hit our spots, do our tours, and then we come back, we just zip back? Or do we kind of come back and take our time and also hit new spots?
Yeah, you'll kind of divided by two.
They do.
So
okay, perfect.
You'll bypass a few places on the way out and then catch them on the way back.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and it really, there's, I mean, we're not doing justice to it because there's so many other interesting places you stop and so many, you know, I've been to France probably, you know, more than a dozen times.
Oh my gosh.
A lot of these places were new to me. You know, I'd heard about some of them I had never even really heard of. And you just get the 31 flavors of France on this little 7-day cruise with a couple day extension. So you really get a nice overview of the country.
Fun. Yeah. That's fun. That's awesome. All right, so we're back in Paris, and are we going to try a different river this time? Or?
Yeah, so this time we're going to go south. The Seine goes kind of mostly to the west, a little bit to the north. So we're going to go a little farther south to the city of Lyon, which is in the center of France. Yeah. And believe it or not, Lyon is actually the food capital of France.
Hello.
So a good place to start.
You got me at that.
And there's a very famous French chef named Paul Bocuse, who is from Lyon, and his restaurant is still there. But the river cruises that go along the Rhône and the Saône rivers, they run together. They're kind of one river system.
Okay.
And they run from kind of near Dijon, which is just a little north of Lyon in central France, all the way down to the Mediterranean near Arles.
Okay.
Aix-en-Provence are some of the other places there. Avignon, and a lot of wine. a lot of wine regions along the way.
Love it.
So there isn't quite as much wine on the Seine River. It's France, so let's be honest. There's wine everywhere.
There's a lot of wine everywhere.
And I hear a rumor that it doesn't give you headaches.
Really?
Too, by the way, that European wine doesn't give you headaches.
Well,
so.
you might know.
I don't
You've been
know.
there a
I
time
don't
or
know.
two.
But when you go, you'll have to report back to us on that. And so this is a cruise that, these are generally always one direction.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they start in Lyon and end in Arles, which is almost on the Mediterranean.
Okay.
So this is a longer distance that
Okay.
you will travel.
Okay.
You can start in Paris. You might start in Nice along the French Riviera, depending on which direction you go. Some cruise lines even have pre-cruise programs in Geneva,
Wow.
Switzerland, and Barcelona, Spain. So you can
Really?
actually get quite a bit of distance on
Yeah.
this itinerary. And now we're in the southern part of France. So this is the regions of Burgundy and Provence.
Okay.
And so if you've read those books about A Year in Provence by Peter Mayle, where they have the big fields of lavender and things like that,
beautiful.
this is the countryside we're talking about. So maybe more like a California climate
Beautiful. Love
than
it.
up in northern France. And so you will definitely visit some of the best wine regions in France.
Right.
You have a chance to visit the Gold Coast in Burgundy, where probably the best wines in the world are produced.
Wow.
You have a chance to visit the Beaujolais region. Everyone's probably familiar with Beaujolais wine.
For sure.
And if you go in the fall, you can get there during harvest time, or you can be there at the time when the Beaujolais Nouveau is released. As you go a little further south, you'll go through the Côte du Rhône region, the Côte de Beaune, actually that's a little further north, Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And a lot of different regions. Yeah, and we'll talk about why it's got that name. A good topic for this week. But and as you get further and further south, you definitely will see the climate change. And so you go from a little bit of, kind of central agriculture area, like we'd maybe be familiar with here in the Midwest, down to a much drier area.
Okay.
And as you get south, you get into some of the cities that have big, well-preserved Roman ruins.
Really?
In Arles, for example, Nîmes, there are a lot of Roman ruins there. Nîmes has a very well-preserved temple there.
I guess I didn't know there was Roman
near
ruins.
Avignon, there's that very famous bridge, the Pont du Gard, that's like a 5-story tall Roman aqueduct.
Yeah.
That actually could still work if they needed it, that you can go see.
Wow.
And then Avignon is kind of about the middle of the cruise, about halfway between the north and the south.
Okay.
And it's a beautiful little French town along the waterfront. It has a half bridge that only goes halfway across the water. The other half is gone. And there's a very famous French song that the kids sing about, "On the bridge of Avignon we dance."
Yeah.
And so it's a very famous little French kids song.
Okay.
And it also happens to be the home of the Papal Palace. And so, right now we only have one pope.
Yeah.
And a couple of years ago, there was actually a retired pope. So you kind of had two popes. But there was a time when there were 2 and 3 active popes.
Okay.
And so one of them lived in Avignon. He was kind of a captive of the French government. They called it the Babylonian captivity. And so the Papal Palace was in Avignon. And a little north of Avignon is the region of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And that is named after the Pope's new castle. So Châteauneuf means new castle.
Okay.
And so the Pope had a summer palace where they made wine. And so that's become that very famous wine region, Châteauneuf-du-Pape. So you can visit that along the way.
Interesting.
And this is also the land of Van Gogh. So, we talked
goodness,
about
really?
Monet being up in northern France, and he said the light there was better. And Monet said, "No, I'm gonna say the light in the south of France is better, and I'm gonna cut off my ear to prove it." Van Gogh had a few demons, but he spent a lot of his time near Arles.
Okay.
And so there are places where he painted that you can actually visit along the way.
Wow.
So you're starting to get the sense here.
Yeah.
We've got the wine piece, the culinary piece. We've got that history, ancient and modern.
Wow.
And then this is a beautiful river. It's a lot wider than the Seine River.
I was just going to ask.
The mountains are higher along the river, and very different climate down there, because now we're talking about places where you have lavender fields. Well, you're not going to have that in northern France. It's a little too cold. So it's a total difference.
Interesting.
And one of the common questions people will often ask me is, which one would you rather do, or which one is the best to do?
Right.
And the great thing is the river cruise companies have made it so easy that you can actually do these as a back-to-back cruise. Which I think is do both.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because the most popular river cruise in Europe is 14 days long. There are way more 7-day cruises out there, but that 14-day river cruise that goes from Amsterdam to Budapest, that's the most popular river cruise in Europe.
Really?
It's the best-selling river cruise every year, year after year.
Yeah.
And so now in France, you can do 14 days back-to-back.
Fine.
And throw in a little bit of time before and after, and you've got a great vacation. And so you really, at that point, will have seen a ton of France in its diversity. You know, it's a big country. France is like the size of Texas.
Wow.
So it's a pretty big country.
Yeah.
And very diverse. And so it is just so neat to be able to get off and walk around these towns. And, you know, you will have had a nice breakfast on board the ship, certainly. But there is nothing better than an actual French croissant from an actual French bakery. And so you can grab your croissant and your coffee in the morning. And then, you know, river cruise ships bring a bottle of wine on board and enjoy it on board. Right. They're not there to, you know, stand there with a metal detector and say, no wine for you. Put that away till you get back.
What do you got there?
That's fine. Bring your wine on board, enjoy your wine. And, of course, the river cruises will bring that cuisine on board as well. And, you know, we talk about AMA Waterways. We talk about the chef's table. Imagine what they do in France.
I can't.
Amazing.
Crazy.
Amazing thing. So, so definitely those 2 river cruises, I would say, are the top ones in France.
All right, breaking news. On a croissant, are you just putting a little bit of butter on there?
I don't put anything on my croissant.
Nothing.
We don't need anything.
Nothing.
That's what drives me crazy. Like, you don't need anything. Now, I have to say, having been to France a few times, I've become a little bit of a butter snob.
I love good butter.
Oh, and the French have the best butter in the world.
Okay.
And they take it as seriously as they take their wine.
Really?
Yeah. So the cheese, the butter, the wine, you know, the names all relate to the place they're from.
Yeah.
There are some really good French butters out there.
All right.
Yeah, so that's what you have for your baguette. You put the butter on the baguette. But the croissant, I don't need anything on it.
Just straight croissant.
Yeah, no, I would be very open to a chocolate croissant. I'm not going to lie.
Really?
About that. Have you ever had one of those?
No.
Oh,
I've not even heard of it, Ted.
They call it in French pain au chocolat, which means chocolate bread.
Oh my gosh.
But it's basically a croissant wrapped around dark chocolate. So it's sweet, but it's not like, you know, regular chocolate. It's got a little bit of a tang to it. And that buttery croissant wrapped around it is so good.
Oh my.
Yes. French breakfast, I think I could actually probably live on French breakfast. It's so good.
You can always tell when you and I are doing this during lunch hour. We're like, food. This is great.
Ooh, you know, and actually here in Hudson, Wisconsin, where we are, there is a bakery that has some really great French
right down on Main Street.
Yeah, St. Croix Bakery.
Yeah, really.
And so they do. I think they come about as close as you can come in the United States to getting authentic French pastries.
Really?
And it's to me it's an art form.
Yeah.
And it's done so badly so often, but if it's done well, it's like French bread.
Right.
If it's done well, best thing ever.
Great. Yeah.
If it's not done well, keep it.
I agree.
So
I agree.
The other thing that sometimes drives people nuts, and it drives my mom nuts in France, is they make their eggs a little runnier than we normally do.
Okay.
And so some people are like, oh, I don't like runny eggs.
Right.
They taste better, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
They're part of the experience of being in France.
And is that a scrambled egg you're talking? Or just
scrambled eggs, omelets.
All of it,
they tend to be a little runnier than we make them and not as fluffy.
Okay.
A little more eggy. And if you really are having fun on YouTube today, watch the Julia Child episode where she teaches you how to make a French omelet.
Really?
Because it's very simple.
Okay.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
But it's very simple. And so if you stay at a French restaurant, stay in a French hotel, they will make very authentic French omelets for you. And I think they're the best omelets in the world.
Well, I'm going to be tuning into that right away because I'm an omelet. I love omelets, and I'm always trying to up my game a little bit. And I think I'm getting pretty good, but
but not fluffy. Not fluffy.
Not fluffy.
They're,
this Julia Childs is not fluffy.
They're not fluffy. They're very French styled. So and they're very thin. Oh, very, very thin. The only other place I've had an omelet as good as in France was, believe it or not, in Cambodia. No, a lot of Cambodia was a French colony.
Oh, sure.
And so they left many things there, but one of them was the ability to make a good omelet.
That's interesting. Yeah. So I make a mean fluffy omelet.
Okay.
Like I can fluff like crazy, but I'm on the other.
Well, try it. Watch
Julia Child's
coming
Child
omelets. Yep.
I'm in.
Yeah, and the way you turn the pan is there's a little wrist action. When as soon as you get it down, it's easy. But getting it down, you might go through a dozen eggs.
No way.
Yeah.
So have you mastered the art?
I have not mastered it. I try it, but I have not mastered it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And then I know we're getting a little bit late, not too bad, but do you want to talk about barges a little bit?
Yeah, and I will mention there is a third French river cruise that's in the area of Bordeaux.
Oh, okay.
Very, very wine focused.
Yeah.
If you like Bordeaux wines, that's a great option. But yeah, let's talk about canal cruises.
Yeah, something I've never heard of.
Yeah, and so they have this phenomenon in France called the hotel barge. And so if you go back in time, and have you noticed that a lot of times I'll say back in the day?
Yeah.
Because I like to kind of try to explain sort of in context what you're experiencing today.
Yeah.
So before trains, before locks and dams on the river,
Sure.
the French built a system of canals, kind of like the Erie Canal here in the United States.
Okay.
And they're partially rivers, but they're also basically ditches dug all over the country.
Huh.
And that was how stuff got to market.
Interesting.
You would have these either wooden originally and then steel-hulled cargo barges that they would hook up to a donkey and pull along the canals.
No way.
And that's how they got stuff to market.
Wow.
And so there's a very extensive system of canals in France. A lot of them are in Burgundy, in that wine area there. And then there's a canal called the Canal du Midi,
Okay.
which stretches from Bordeaux all the way to the Mediterranean Sea.
Wow.
So it actually cuts France across the bottom.
Sure.
It has a tunnel on it that was hand-hewed out of solid rocks, and it's several miles long.
Wow.
And if you remember, one of the causes of the French Revolution was that they spent too much money, and they were bankrupt.
Yeah.
And they fought a lot of wars, and that was part of it. But building the Canal du Midi was one of the things that bankrupted the French monarchy and led to the French Revolution.
Really?
Yeah, but these barges eventually became motorized.
Yep.
And then as trains came along, the canals kind of fell out of use.
Sure.
And so after World War II, a couple very enterprising British people found the canal system. I mean, it wasn't hidden, but they found it.
Yeah.
They bought some old barges, and they turned them into floating luxury hotels. They carry between 8 and 16 passengers,
Okay.
and they will cruise on these little canals. And they're about as wide as this table. If your barge sinks, you're going to get your feet wet. They're not very deep.
Way.
The lock and dams are manually operated. So someone will come out and they'll open the lock.
This is crazy.
And then they'll turn a crank and the water will either flow in or flow out.
Yeah.
I mean, very, very primitive in many ways, but still workable.
Wow.
And you get to experience a part of France that almost no tourists go to.
Right.
Those small towns with the little chateaus, the little wineries, the little churches.
Amazing.
Just beautiful.
Yeah.
And the way they're set up, they're generally basically all-inclusive.
Okay.
And so you have a captain with you. You have a tour guide who travels with you, and he or she drives a little mini bus that comes with you, and each day you go off and do your excursions in the little mini bus. And, there's a staff on the boat as well. And then the most important person on board the barge is the chef.
For sure.
And these are excellent chefs. The first time I did it, the chef we had, her job before she did this is she was a private chef to the Dutch royal family.
Come on.
She really knew what she was doing.
Wow.
And so if you want the absolute best in French cuisine, very authentic French cuisine, French wines, and to discover the hidden countryside of France, this is a great way to do it. They travel with bicycles. You can bicycle along the little towpath where the donkeys used to go. And the places you'll visit are places that almost no one has heard of.
Wow.
Very small villages. It's a very flexible, relaxed experience. You can book a cabin and just travel, as part of a group of people, or you can charter them. And so for families who want to do something in France together, a charter is a great idea, or groups of friends who want to do something. And they are such a unique experience. No one's ever really heard of it.
Yeah.
But for folks who've maybe taken a couple of river cruises, want to try something different.
Right.
For folks who really want an immersive experience in France, the crews are a mix of British and French.
Okay.
So you'll have kind of both there. But you're going to go to those tiny little towns, either in the Burgundy wine region or in the south of France. And the excursions they do are just amazing.
I love it.
And if you have a family with kids and you want to charter the barge, there's some great programs that we can help you set up that are really kid oriented.
Wow.
And some of just those really simple things, instead of every day going to a castle or a winery, one day you're going to go to the park.
Yep.
Or one day you're going to go to the local water park and spend the morning, and the kids are going to go just play at the water park.
Wow.
And then in the afternoon you can do something a little more intellectual. But they're just such a neat
Amazing.
option. And they're one of my favorite ways to travel. I'm very fortunate that I've had a chance to do that. Take a couple different barge trips, see a lot of the barges in person. They're all different. Everyone has their own unique personality. And, you have some that are 5-star, absolutely exquisite. You have some that are a little more modest, yet excellent. And so I've got some good experience with that facet of the business. And just something that if you're thinking about going to France, maybe you've done a river cruise before, you want a little alternative, let's talk, because they're just a cool experience.
So I have to ask, I'm kind of a visual guy. Paint the picture for me, when I'm getting onto the barge. I know what a river cruise ship, I know I get on, there's kind of a main area, there's your front area where you dance and have cocktails, and then you've got restaurant below, and then in the back is your suites. Paint the picture for me of the barge.
Yeah, so these are very small.
Okay.
And they'll have typically 2.5 decks.
Okay.
So you'll embark on the upper deck. And it's a lot like actually a houseboat in the United States in some ways. You'll have a small seating area there, a small dining area, and the kitchen there. And then generally downstairs on the lower level in the old cargo hold of the ship, they've built in the staterooms.
Oh,
and some are quite large, quite luxurious. Some are a little bit smaller. And then typically on the top, there's like a sun deck where you can sit either on the top or the front. Some have hot tubs in the front. And then in the back, there's a big wheel. Yeah. And that's where the guy drives the ship from. They don't sail at night. So, they spend the night moored, so you're not hearing the motor because they're pretty small. So during the day when you're sailing, you will hear the motor. Yeah. But they spend the night. And, there are even some where they, every night instead of having dinner on board the ship, they take you to a Michelin star restaurant for dinner.
Oh, my gosh. Instead.
It's a very, very customizable trip and so cool. Yeah. And so really something I think if you haven't thought about doing, reach out and ask me, and I'll explain more to you because it's a cool thing that's very, obscure in the giant world of travel. Not a lot of people know about it.
That sounds awesome. Well, what a fun way to wrap up our France river cruises.
I know. I'm hungry. I'm hungry now.
Before we get out of here, tell us what the best way to get a hold of you and your team.
Yeah, so if you look down in the comments section below, we've put a link to our website. It's tedblanktravel.com. Just drop us a note, and myself or one of my very expert staff who have all been on several river cruises. Yeah. It's kind of funny. That's one of the things that I insist upon in the first year is we got to get everybody on a river cruise at least once.
It's a rough go working over here.
But you got to have that expertise to be able to best help our clients. Yeah. And so just drop us a note and we'll be happy to reach out, schedule an appointment, and talk about France, river cruising, canal cruising, and anything else related to that.
I love it.
To help you plan that vacation.
Love it. Ted's our travel expert. I'm the rookie, Ken Conan. Below, you can like and subscribe to us and keep in touch. Thanks again for coming on the program. As always, I appreciate it. Ted Talks Cruises, one of the best.